Opportunity portfolio is about nothing more than staying in business, despite the fact that the world is constantly changing around you. This presentation is about growth. Particularly, it's about business growth strategies. Do you have a strategy for growing your business? Most businesses say that they do. Now, how many of those strategies do you think are about selling current products to current customers? My experience is that most of them are on exactly that. Do you have an R&D department? If so, that's great. But is it helping to build the future of your business, or is it simply engaged in technology development that you hope someday, in some unforeseen way, will help you generate new business? R&D departments are wonderful. I worked in one for more than 30 years. We came up with lots of ideas, wonderful ideas. But unfortunately, many of those ideas never saw the light of day. Probably most of them. Was it because we were dumb in the R&D department and came up with bad ideas that wouldn't work? Was it perhaps because the people in the rest of the company were just too thick-headed to appreciate the value of what we'd invented? Sometimes we thought so. But that isn't the real reason. You know what the main reason was that our ideas didn't see the light of day? It was, and we are by no means unique in this respect, because our ideas didn't align with what the rest of the company was doing. Because the people in the rest of the company were very focused on what do you think? Delivering current products to current customers. And guess what? That's what they should have been doing. After all, that's where the money comes from, isn't it? Selling current products to current customers. After all, it doesn't take 10 times the effort to sell doesn't it take 10 times the effort to sell it to a new customer than a current customer? If that's where all the money comes from, and getting new revenue is so hard, why should the company be doing anything else? Why should the company be working on anything new? When those people in R&D come out with their hot new ideas, why shouldn't the company just tell them to go back to their ivory towers, thank them politely, and put their collective noses back on the grindstone? What's wrong with that idea? Why can't the company just live happily in our business comfort zone forever? Have you read this book? It's wonderful. I recommend it to you. If you have read it, you know the answer to question 1 that I just raised. You can't stay in quadrant 1 because the world is constantly changing. In the metaphor of this book, your cheese is always being moved, or getting stale, or getting eaten up. One day your current customers may go away to a competitor, to a new technology, or out of business, or to a low-cost provider overseas. And what happens then? I'd like to tell a story about a local businessman who was in the office furniture business. His customers loved this product. But one day the office furniture market fell 70%. He was then forced to go out of his business comfort zone and in the middle of a crisis. So what did he do? Because the story does have a happy ending. He went to what we call quadrant 2. A little later we'll see what that means. But it would have been much better if he didn't have to make this transition in a crisis. This quadrant map was originally invented by Philip Kotler of Harvard Business School. Basically what we have is 2 axes here, the market axis, which is on the horizontal, and the product axis, which is on the vertical. In the lower left quadrant, we are selling our existing products to our existing customers. That's the business comfort zone we call quadrant 1. If we move up above that quadrant and step up, we're selling new products to our existing customers. So the market is the same, but the product is new. If we move to the right from quadrant 1 into quadrant 2 and step out, what we're doing then is selling our existing product to new customers. And that's quadrant 2. And if we take the leap and make the biggest change of all, we sell new products to new customers and move into quadrant 4. Some companies have a good part of their business in one of these quadrants or their other. Most mature businesses have most of their business in quadrant 1. On the other hand, startups who have no current business are entirely in quadrant 4. They're all selling new products to new customers. So let's stop and summarize for a minute. You can only make money in quadrant 1. All the other quadrants are investments in the future growth of your business. That's one reason many companies keep most of their investments in quadrant 1. But quadrant 1 is unstable because the world keeps changing. A strategic allocation of your business investments should therefore include all the quadrants. In time, as this figure shows, your investments in the other quadrants, if intelligently made, should bear fruit and replace those current businesses which are fading away. This slide is about risk. One of the reasons that companies put so much of their time and effort into Quadrant 1 is the problem of risk. The other three quadrants are full of unknowns and therefore they're full of risk, particularly Quadrant 4. But there are other ways to reduce those risks with careful planning, calculating the risks. Risks won't go away, but they'll be smaller. Risks are higher in the outer quadrants, but they decline with study and experience. The lower current risk in Quadrant 1 increases as the business ages. At Opportunity Associates, we've created a 4-module program to help you deliberately and scientifically calculate what quadrant asset allocation you should have and how to achieve it. It asks 4 questions, each of which is answered by a set of processes called a module. Question 1 is, where is your business now? That's your baseline. That's where your current revenues and profits are coming from, and where are you putting your investments in the future? That is, into innovation and marketing. Module 2 is, what do you want your business to be? That's the allocation of resources and where it will take you, where you want to go in the future, and how does that compare with the way you're actually spending your revenues? Module 3 is, how do you get there? It's creating action plans to implement the visions that you decide upon in Module 2. And finally, how will you stay there? What works and what doesn't work? And how do you manage the continuous change of new revenues created from the outer quadrants moving into Quadrant 1 and replacing your current revenues? This module is about keeping your business stable in a continually changing economic environment. Let's start by talking about Module 1. If you're going to go somewhere, it's useful to know where you're starting from. This module helps you find that out. All that is necessary to create these pie charts, which we call Quadrant Asset Allocation Maps, or QAMs, is a matrix produced from your current revenues and spending. We don't have to know the actual financial numbers of your company to prepare these maps. All we need is a percentage breakdown of revenues and profits by product and market. These examples show that the maps look quite different for different types of companies. There's no correct answer as to what your map should look like. It's a consequence of what kind of company you are. The important thing is that your map should reflect your mission and vision for the company. Often it doesn't come close. Quadrant asset allocation maps differ with the type of business and the stage in the life of business. Everyone makes these asset allocation choices whether they do them consciously or not. We think a conscious choice is a better one. Finding out what your quadrant asset allocation should be is done in Module 2. Most businesses have considered activities in the other quadrants, sometimes quite seriously. There are lots of reports gathering dust on shelves in most businesses. What almost never happens, however, is that these proposals are considered together and compared to one another. The resources needed to implement the proposals are not calculated, nor is the effect on the company of the opportunities potential to supply the needed growth. Mostly they're considered indifferently, if at all. That is, outside the product development organizations that produce them. In one simulation of daily operations that I attended at a large company, they spent a short interval of the budget time considering R&D proposals, evaluating them only by their cost, benefits being too uncertain, discarded most as too expensive, and then went back to business as usual. Mostly ideas that are advanced move forward at the behest of powerful champions who can cut through the usual red tape. These folks are few and far between, and it's also difficult to connect them with the ideas they might support. I have a friend whose whole business was built around getting ideas to these champions. The first step that we recommend is to inventory your opportunities, then build them out with additions. An individual can do this work, but a group session is preferable to get the benefits of multiple points of view. The next step after the inventory is to compare the alternative projects on a common basis. Then to choose deliberately which products will move on to Module 3 in preparation for implementation. Typical concerns covered in this evaluation include the potential benefits, that is revenues, and the costs of implementation, the risks, and the alignment of the project with the available corporate resources. Some companies may have existing processes in place for these activities, others will have to create something new. The result of this phase is a proposed allocation of resources, which is likely to be quite different from what was discovered in Module 1. This activity should be separate from the regular budgeting process. Module 3 is about action plans. In this module, we determine the consequences of the new asset allocations that we proposed in Module 2. What action items are necessary to make that happen? As you can see from the slide, there's quite a different list of activities depending upon what quadrants are targeted. The most work goes into a LEAP activity in Quadrant 4. When this step is completed, the resource requirements can be calculated and compared to what's available. It may be necessary to scale down an overly ambitious allocation. Sometimes there are resources available to fund additional projects. For this reason, it's useful to rank order the projects before beginning Module 3 to get an idea which projects could be added or subtracted to. Module 4 is about evaluation of results, about fine-tuning and course correction. A time after the projects are decided upon in Module 3 have been in operation, and it's necessary to see what's working and what's not, and what changes need to be made. This example shows the case where some projects have been very successful and others have not been. Project E has been so successful that it might be moved into Quadrant 1. The funds it now produces can be used to support other projects. Project C has not been successful. It's time to ask why and whether Project C should be continued. The four-module quadrant process is a continuous one. It's a structured way of adapting to change, and because change is constant, so must the process be. Intelligently run and implemented, opportunity portfolio should keep your business growing and profitable. Whatever else is going on, however unexpected, you will always have a plan B to fall back on. After the process has been going for some time, hopefully your opportunities were well chosen and you're bringing in revenue. This means by definition they will now have moved into Quadrant 1. It's a new Quadrant 1, but because the world keeps changing, you can't rest on your laurels. You need to establish a new set of goals in the other three quadrants. And therefore, you're back at the beginning, establishing a new set of benchmarks in Module 1. The four-module quadrant process is a continuous one. It's a structured way of adapting to change, and because change is constant, so must the process be. Intelligently run and implemented, growing beyond Quadrant 1, opportunity portfolio should keep your businesses growing and profitable. Whatever else is going on, however unexpected, you will always have a plan B to fall back on, which should at least reduce the amount of crisis management you have to do.